Welcome back to another episode of Unjaded. Today is a regular Monday episode, so it's going to be a little bit longer than our daily drops. But before we get into it, I would love for you to meet Juliana. Juliana and I spent a full day together in a content audit intensive, and we worked for 8 hours on her really finding the message within her own human design. So we married human design and copywriting and writing skills and all of the things to land on messaging for her launch, because she has some big goals for this launch and she wants to knock it out of the park. And she understands that she's not doing that with her current content. One of the reasons is that she was working with a manifesting generator coach with all of the centers defined, and she was trying to create content like that manifesting generator coach creates content because that's what she was training her to do. Here's the thing about your human design. Your human design is the window to exactly what you need to say, how exactly you need to say it, and who exactly you're speaking to. And that's not going to be the same for you as it is for me, as it is for Juliana, as it is for any of the other people who you have heard from who've gone through my Content by Design system to start to create content that actually lands with their people and gets them hired. Because your content, just like everything else in your life, is an inside job. Here's Juliana.
I have worked with many business coaches. The work I did with Vickie during the business intensive was next level. The ahas, breakthroughs, and epiphanies I had were out of this world. Vickie has the ability to hop, skip, and leap from human design to business strategy to deep emotional beliefs so that you can really get unstuck in your business. Because we all know it's not just the strategy you need, it's also clearing the beliefs that keep you small. As a psychotherapist, energy worker, and human design specialist, I found Vickie's support to be exactly what I needed. It takes tremendous skill for someone to meet me at the depths at which I am willing and want to go. And Vickie's got it. In 8 hours, I got to my deep inner truth at what stops me from accessing it. I got crystal clear on how I can leverage my human design in content creation. And I got her eyes on my website and how I can communicate my message with crystal clarity.
Welcome to Unjaded. This is your straight talk, shoot from the hip, wrapped in a little bit of love, Human Design for Business podcast. We talk a lot here about clarifying your message so that you can bring in paying clients with ease. And ease is different from easy. Stick around to find out how we roll here. I'm your host, Vickie Dickson. I am a 2-4 emotional manifesting generator, light on the emotional, and I'm a quad right in human design. In real speak, I am an entrepreneur of 30 plus years. I've had every kind of business there is, and I always say that business is my love language. I can't wait to dive in with you here on the podcast.
So welcome to Unjaded. Today I have a super fun episode. I love these little group coaching episodes because we get to hear from other, mostly women in business, and we get to shout out other businesses in the space. So we are talking today about podcasting because it is a topic of conversation that's hot and heavy in my world right now. I'm just fresh off the launch of a second podcast. It is not my own podcast, but I'm fortunate to host a second podcast for Bodygraph Chart. And that podcast is called The Pulse on Human Design. Those are highly consumable episodes. They're, 10 minutes or less, most of them. And they're all about building your business. Now, I've heard it said often in the last week since we launched that it's a podcast for any kind of business. So you don't have to have a human design business to benefit from that podcast at all, the same as Unjaded. So we're going to be talking today about podcasting because a lot of people are asking, oh my gosh, I want to start a podcast, or where would you even begin to start a podcast? Or I wish I could do a drum roll here. The biggest thing that people ask about starting a podcast is how to come up with ideas. What if I run out of things to say? That seems to be the reason that people don't start a podcast. And I know I felt like that too. I had no intentions of starting a podcast before last year when I went to Tribal. And actually one of the guests here today was at Tribal with me as well. And I didn't even think of starting a podcast. And then we kept hearing in the room how search is going to audio and how we needed to get more audio out there. And it should be our goal to have twice as much audio as we do now. And I was like, oh gosh, maybe I do need to start a podcast. So I kind of let it percolate for a little bit, not too long though. It was like 6 weeks from that day that I launched my own podcast, and it has been a blast ever since. We're actually going to be coming up on 100 episodes. By the time the podcast is a year old, we will have 100 episodes done. So that's super fun. Thank you for being here for the year with me. So let's talk about you and you starting a podcast. Podcasting is amazing because you are in someone's ears. You have their earballs for the amount of time of your episode. So it's a really great way to connect with your listeners. And search is going more and more towards audio. So a podcast can be a really good idea. And it's also a good driver in your business. It's a good way to start your repurposing journey. So, instead of having maybe a blog post or something like that, the podcast episode can be something that you can repurpose to all of your Instagram content, to your emails, to all of those things. And one last kick for podcasting is that you don't really have to be on video. So you can completely just do an audio podcast. Now, I know I get a lot of pushback sometimes on that because I don't record my episodes mostly on video. I do them straight up on audio and they go to YouTube that way. It's not that I have a problem with video. I just find it easier to just come in my house coat or whatever happens to be going on in my life when I'm in response as a manifesting generator and start to record. So that's one of the beauties. If you don't love video, podcasting can be good as well. But the thing that people really are concerned about is that they're going to run out of things to say. So I'm going to just go through 3 or 4 things that can help you with coming up with things to say on a regular basis for your episodes. So the first thing is to really define the niche that you're speaking in and to be as narrow as you possibly can. There is nothing sexier than a really tight niche. Like the smaller your niche, the more money you will make. And I know that in the human design space, we tend to think that human design is a niche. And yes, it can be for a while. But the more you can possibly niche that down, the easier it is going to be for you to come up with content. And it seems like it's the opposite. It seems like, oh, well, if I have this broad topic, then it'll be really easy to come up with ideas. But it's too much. It's too much for your brain. Your brain has no pathway to stay in. So having a narrower niche makes it easier, not only for you, for your listener. So I had an experience last week. I was looking for a brand strategist because I'm in the middle of a brand refresh. And I was looking for a brand strategist. So I started, of course, with podcasts and I search brand strategist and I come up with this person who seems like it's going to be amazing. And I start going through her episodes and she has, over 200 episodes. And I had to dig and dig and dig and dig and dig to find one on brand strategy. It was crazy. There was everything but brand strategy on this podcast. And that's easy to do because there's so many things we could talk about. In my own podcasting journey over the past year, I started out more broad, but you just let your niche kind of marinate over time. You just kind of let it get narrower over time. You let your niche find you over time, and you will find an area, if you're open to it, you will find an area where you are naturally drawn to. So for me, as you have probably found over the course of the last year, it just keeps getting more and more and more and more and more about creating content because that's my baby. And right now we're in the middle of 30 days of episodes. And it is so easy because I know I'm talking about content. I know that somehow I'm tying that back to your voice. So that is one of the things that's going to make it really easy for you to create the number of episodes that you want to create in your podcast is to define your niche. Another thing, of course, is to lean into your human design strategy. And it seems like no duh. If you're listening to this, you might be like, well, of course I'm going to lean into my human design strategy, but are you really? Do you really know what that feels like in your body? Do you understand that as a projector, you need to get in front of the mirror every single day and recognize yourself for your gifts? Do you get that when you are having an episode idea come through you, you want to get in front of the mirror and really work it out with yourself? You want a sounding board for that? Do you get, as a generator, a manifesting generator, how to actually create in response? How to have something in the world hit you between the eyeballs and you go and record a podcast episode right away? Or at least, if you could see my notebook, I have so many notebooks, but it's just a constant, jotting down things that I'm responding to. I just recorded an episode this morning before this. I had 15 minutes. Again, I wasn't dressed for it or anything, just go to the microphone. And it was all about something that happened on Instagram on Friday night, but I had captured it for myself while I was in response so that then I could bring it to you. So the first thing is going to be to absolutely follow your human design strategy and then to show up as your human design profile. Remember that your human design profile is who the world needs you to be. That is the role that you play in the movie of your life. We need you showing up as you. So if you're a one-line profile, you may have a podcast that's all about research. You may have something where you are actually bringing the data and the information to your people. If you're a second-line profile, it may be a lot about what's alive for you right now. Remember that you're selective and discerning about what you're responding to or what you're being invited to or what you're initiating. Third-line profiles. Third-line profiles are my favorite. We want to hear about how you screwed up. We want to hear about all the mistakes that you're making. We want to hear how you are dropping the shame and just living your life and showing us how it gets to be done. Fourth line, you are here for your community. We want you to bring us along on your journey with us. We are with you. We are there for you because we are part of your community. Fifth line profiles, you got to tell it like it is. You have to put your flag, your line in the sand and say, this is how it is. And you may not like it, but this is what I see. And then sixth line profiles, you're kind of holding everybody. You're supporting and you're role modeling and you're uncomfortable sometimes, but we're looking to you to show us how it gets done. So your human design profile really gives a lot to how your voice is meant to show up in the world. And then I'm going to unpack one more little human design piece with you before we open it up to our guests. So one of the things that's going to be really important in human design speak is whether you have a defined throat or an undefined throat. Lots of times I'll hear people say, well, I have an undefined throat, so I can't have a podcast. Not true. You can still have a podcast, or you could do a strategy where you guest on other people's podcasts. I've talked about this before on the show, but at PodFest last year, there was someone who guests on about 100 podcasts a year. That's his entire strategy. He doesn't want the whole, I know, wild. Joni's eyes guest just went like, wow, 100 podcasts a year. That's 2 podcasts a week he is guesting on. And that's his whole marketing strategy. So he doesn't have any of the background, like hiring an editor, getting it onto the podcast player, any of that stuff. He just is guesting on other people's podcasts and then he markets it. We're going to talk about marketing too. So that can be a strategy. The other thing with an undefined throat is that remember that you are here to be wise about the timing to speak. So something that can work really well for an undefined throat is having a series, a mini series. So you could release little micro, think how much we want to see Yellowstone when it comes out, or Virgin River, or whatever show it is that you watch. You just wait with bated breath for that to come out, that little mini series. You can do anything you want with a defined throat or undefined throat, but it just may be easier to have some sort of a series like that. So you get to redefine what consistency means to you, and leaning into your human design to create content really allows you to trust that the people who are meant for you will hear the message that you are meant to say if you are saying the thing that you came here to say. Doesn't matter if you're podcasting, posting on Instagram, blogging, whatever it is that you're doing, your people will find you if you are actually using everything that you came here with, all of your gifts. And then I'm just going to do one bonus tip before we open it up to our guests. The thing that I see happening a lot in this space is that people do not market their podcast, right? And then we have pod fade. So you might start a podcast and you're all gung ho. I'm going to do this thing. I'm all excited. I'm going to get this podcast up and running. And then, you release 5 or 6 episodes. I think it's only 10% of podcasts that ever make it past 20 episodes. So you release 5 or 10 episodes and then it's crickets. So you get really discouraged and you just quit. But really, maybe you didn't market it well enough. So this morning, I'm doing these daily drops, and over the weekend, I took a big pause in my life. As a second line profile, I needed to retreat from everything after 2 launches in the last 2 weeks with Bodygraph Chart. And I had 7 listeners on one of the episodes this morning when I got up on Saturday's episode, I think. And that was 2 hours ago. And when I just checked, I had 46. And all I did was do an Instagram story about it. So, that's not where the numbers will end up, but it's just like, are you talking about your podcast enough? So Adam Shibley is Podcasting Business School. He talks about having 5 different assets within 72 hours of your podcast episode being released. And that is not an Instagram post that is exactly the same post that you auto post to Facebook and everywhere else. That is different posts for every platform. So it can be an Instagram story, an Instagram feed, an Instagram live with your guest if you have a guest, a LinkedIn post, a blog post, a YouTube video. It can be any combination of anything, but 5 different places within 72 hours so that the podcast algorithm continues to push you out. So I think the thing with your marketing of your podcast is that you have to buy into your podcast. You have to love your podcast enough to understand that people want to hear about it. And sometimes people will say to me, oh, but I don't want to bother people with emailing them about the podcast. It's like you're giving people a free resource. Your podcast is a free resource that they can use to learn or not. And you emailing them or posting about it on Instagram is not bothering them. It's actually serving them. It's one of the ways that you're going to serve them. So please don't just think that you will put your podcast out and somehow the podcast gods will come along and everything will align perfectly, and hundreds and thousands of listeners will find your podcast without you doing anything, because that's just not how the world works. Business is business is business, no matter what your human design. So once you create your podcast, you got to market it. You got to get it out there for people.
It's coming. If you're tired of being a slave to the algorithm and you're really ready to claim your place in the online space, then this message is for you. I'm getting ready to launch another live round of the Content by Design course, where you learn to leverage your human design so that you can create content that draws your ideal clients to you with ease, without feeling yucky or salesy, and definitely without being a slave to the algorithm. We work on blog posts and email sequences and podcast episodes and social media posts and all of the things, because no matter what you're creating, it needs to come from who you are here to be, what you're here to say, how you're here to say it, and who you're here to say it to. Get on the wait list. The link is in the show notes for you.
Okay, so I am going to open up the floor to our guests. I have two spectacular women in the room with me today. I have Carolina Diposada. It's hard for me to say that. And Joni May. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you.
So questions, conversation around podcasting. Carolyn, you have a podcast.
I do have a podcast. And I have to say that just listening to you share these tips was very exciting. I loved, I'm like taking notes. I was like, am I supposed to be getting ready to say something or take notes?
It's okay. It's okay. I love the generator. So you're a generator type in human design. And I love the excitement. I can feel the excitement from your sacral, right?
Yeah, it was so exciting. In fact, when you were talking about the profiles, the different profiles, I didn't remember what profile I was. So I went into the little chart that I have that I downloaded when I did my reading with you, which was phenomenal. And I downloaded it. I'm like, oh, I'm a fifth line profile. But it's crazy. When I did a reading with you, I learned about my human design, but then, I came in and then I came out, because human design is not my area of work. I used it because you and I met at Tribal. You showed me so many amazing things. I did a reading with you so that I could learn about myself and my business. So helpful. And then I just kind of walked out of it. So sometimes I forget the language. I know I'm a generator, but I forget everything else. So you started talking about being throat defined or undefined. I can't remember if I have a defined throat or not a defined throat. And I'm looking at my thing and I'm like, how do I know?
We'll go through your chart after. Just send me a message on Instagram. We'll go through it. But a fifth line profile, yeah. And I can see that in you. I can see how you kind of are here to like stand up and be counted and to say the thing that sometimes people don't want to say, right? You're all about finding bliss in the everyday moments. And people often, I just got goosebumps over my whole body. People forget that. People forget to find bliss in everyday life, right?
Yes. So everything that you said was wonderful. And one of the things that you said, and I'd love to bring it back to this, is you said, define your niche, but then you also said, let your niche find you. And I'd love for you to expand a little bit on that, because my podcast is, like you said, it's about finding bliss. So for me, it's listening for the blissful moments in your life, but really what does that mean? What are the areas that I work in? And I work in mindset, wellness, and relationships, which is very broad. It's a very broad stroke. It's no different than saying human design is, you paint that with a wide brush. If I say I work in mindset, wellness, and relationships, they're like, oh, well, so you do everything, right? And I don't feel like I do everything, but I do also recognize that that's not a niche. So I was very interested in how you would pursue letting your niche find you. I only talk about those three things. I tell stories and they're always related to my mindset, wellness, or relationships, but I would love to let my niche find me.
Okay, so thank you for that. Those can be, I hate the word pillars, but those can be kind of pillars of how you deal with bliss, or how you guide people to their bliss, right? Those could be your three pillars for sure.
I actually call them my pillars.
No, there you go. There you go. So I think that the niche conversation is just because there's so much pushback on niche right now, and people want to think that you don't need to define a niche. And I think that we are getting niche and target audience confused. So lots of times people will think, well, my niche is a 40-year-old blonde woman who drives a Subaru and has 4 kids and makes $80,000 a year and blah, 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 eats broccoli and chicken for dinner every night, whatever. And that's not the niche. The niche is really the problem that you're solving. So even in the human design space, where people will always say, well, human design is a niche. Well, it is, and it's not. Like, it's super, super broad. So what problem are you solving with your human design business? What problem are you solving with your bliss business? What does it actually help someone do to find the bliss in everyday moments? Because that's probably your niche, is probably that thing that you're helping people to do through relationship and mindset and wellness. You know, it might be relationship to herself.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's relationships. It's all relationships, relationships with your spouse, with your family. I think it all matters.
When I always say marinate in it, because we do niche down over time. And you will probably find that with your podcast, I think, over time, that you will just keep getting narrower. And it's like all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I'm talking about the same thing. I didn't even really realize that I was talking about the same thing, but it just kind of gets a little bit stronger in you. And I think we get less afraid to drop the other stuff. In the beginning, it can be kind of scary to walk away from the other stuff. In my own business, I have people who have been with me through every iteration of my business for the last 30 years. And a lot of them don't have businesses. So it was really scary. I was still kind of trying to hold them and bring them along with me, you know? So I think that it just gets more that we kind of stand in our niche as much as our niche finds us, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. I'm 19 episodes in.
Yay.
Actually, that's not true. I'm 20 episodes in.
Awesome. Top 10%.
Yeah, I'm in the top 10%.
Yeah.
Very excited. So I'm 20 episodes in, and I learned this. Because I'm a responder, right? As a generator, I'm always in response. So the way that I personally respond is through storytelling. So I've realized my gift is I see a story, or I witness a story, I experience a story, and then I just find the lesson in that story and I tell it on the podcast, and then I apply it to your life. And sometimes it's about bliss, and sometimes I don't even mention the word bliss. It's not about bliss. It's because I think you don't pursue bliss, you pursue the path that leads to you finding bliss in your life. So it's really about the path. And so I'm doing all these stories, and sometimes I wonder, is that a niche or not a niche? But I'm just going for it, and I'm responding because you told me to.
Yeah. I love that, because you told me to. My staff used to wear bracelets. What would Vickie do at my store? Yes, I love that. And you know what I've just decided in response to you is that the next daily drop, so the day after this episode airs, I will air a mini recording of Caro's chart, so that you guys can see. We'll put a picture of her chart in the show notes for you, and that'll be tomorrow, and you can see where the storytelling comes in for her. We'll unpack it on the show live. Okay. So plan for 10 or 15 minutes tomorrow on the daily drop. Okay.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. Yay. Thank you for being here. And I just assumed that you would say yes to that. So I just went ahead and did it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We won't put your birth information or anything. Yeah.
Right. My address, my social security.
No. Yeah, picture of the front of your house. Yeah. No. Joni, what's going on with you? Do you have a conversation around this podcasting business? Nope, you stayed on mute.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm actually in the discovery phase right now. I'm in transition. I recently have left my career of over 20 years and am exploring the US and transitioning to whatever's next for me. Living my design through experiencing life, bumping into things, figuring out what works. I recently, about 2.5 years ago, discovered human design, and it has drastically changed my life, and I've leaned into that. And so right now I'm learning as much as I can, and podcasting is something that's out there. It's just a maybe right now. So I'm gathering all the information to see how that might work out.
I love it. What's your profile again? Remind me.
3-5.
Oh, yes. I love 3-5s. I love 3-5s. Yeah. I had a guest on once. She's a 3-5, and she described 3-5s as unhinged. And my granddaughter is 4 and she's a 3-5. And I'm like, yep. Especially when you're allowed to be unhinged, right? When you allow yourself to be unhinged. Yeah.
Right. It's definitely a sigh of relief when you realize that's just who you are, and it's okay to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what your people need you to be for them, right? Well, thank you both for being here. I appreciate you joining me for this episode. Now it's time to do a shout out. So I would love to let you know where you can find both of these fantabulous women. Carol, where can people find you?
So you can listen to my podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and it's called Blissin Up, BLISSN Up, which is listening for the sparks of bliss in your life. And then if you are looking for me on Instagram or anywhere else, it's very simple. It's Caroline De Posada, which you'll probably have to go to the show notes to learn how to spell because, I'm Cuban.
I will put that in the show notes for you for sure. Thank you for being here. Joni?
Thank you for having me, by the way.
You're
was
welcome.
fun.
Hi. Yeah. So I have a website for human design, just getting started and just introducing the basics to people and sharing what I'm learning as I'm learning. So it's theempoweredblueprint.com.
Awesome. I love it. And we will link that in the show notes for you so that you can find Joni as well. So thank you for being here. And remember to tune in for tomorrow's Daily Drop, where we are going to be doing a live mini reading of Caro's chart as it relates to her business and her podcast.
I will definitely be listening in because I'm sure I have a lot to learn. Thank you, Vickie.
You're welcome.